You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
You're looking good here.
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
After Armand, take care of the defense. That's a very simple matter to hop down from one step to the next.
Yeah, that's not a confusing.
I just can't tell you how proud we all are of what for every American, this has to be the proudest day of our lives. And for people all over the world, I am sure they too join with us in recognizing what an immense feat this is. Because of what you have done. Roger, I say I'm not having too much success in leveling the TSD. I got a lettering.
Hey, we gave him a 10 minute break.
Yeah, we can utilize that 10 minutes launch at the bottom of the ladder. Yeah. Unofficial time off the surface at 1:11:37:32.
Underneath it says, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. It came in peace for all mankind." It has the crew members' signatures and the signature of the President of the United States.
Mike, I haven't seen you. What is going on? I haven't seen you in so long, and here I am.
Chris.
You invite me back on the show, and you're on the moon. You're not in Portland.
That's fine. I'm using the reflectometer here, so we're doing laser transmission. Of course, I kind of blew that a little bit. There's going to be like a 2-second delay.
Because you're on the moon?
Because I'm on the moon. Yeah. Yeah, and actually, watch. I'm gone back in time too. Look at that. There's Buzz Aldrin. Hey, Buzz.
Whoa.
Hey, let's take some pictures. Smile. So yeah, it's been a nice, quiet time, enjoying the vista here on the moon. Look, hi. I'm waving at you.
Hey. Whoa.
Hi, Chris.
So that's amazing.
Yep, there are 5 sequences. This will be shown at the OMSI. Kids 9 and above, as well as the adult kids. We'll be able to try this in a little bit. I'll show you guys how it'll all work.
I've got the VR, actual. And what kind of headset you got on there?
Well, right now I've got a Toshiba Windows Mixed Reality, which is a good point. It seems to be working. Now I'm going to change out the hands here to gloves when I finally release the light version after the event on July 20th, which, if you know, is the actual moon landing. Here, I'm going to go to the next item here. Can you still hear me properly, or do I need to turn down?
No, I can
President
hear you great.
Nixon there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay. So, like I said, now you're listening to President Nixon as he spoke to him, and I tried to duplicate kind of what they were doing at this exact moment on the moon, as far as what I could see from the video camera. And if you look in front of me, there's an inset color image. That is the Westinghouse black and white camera that I modeled to kind of replicate what was actually there. And even though my cable's a little thicker, theirs was a thinner. But if you look down here, I've actually modeled the soil sampler, which you can pick up. Sadly, I don't have enough room here to work with it. And then if you see some of the stones are a little more shinier or glossy, you can actually pick those up and throw them. And it's really fun in 1/6 gravity because they go a lot. I can understand why Neil and Buzz had such a blast, because they literally were like superhuman people.
This is amazing. So we're so it's going to be at the Omni in Portland, Oregon.
OMSI, the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, on July 20th, which is a Saturday, all day. They call it their, what do they call it? Space Day. And then on July 31st, which is their OMSI After Dark, which is just for adults. They serve, I think, some beer, and you can basically experience, I've got 4. This is one of them. I will have one where you can control the lunar module, either coming down or being blasted off. There it is. And you saw the interior. It is extremely detailed. You'll be able to only mess with a couple of buttons. And the other thing I'm doing is I'm going to be mapping the joysticks to the actual physical joysticks. So the proprioception that we work with, you could literally just take your hands, grab the joysticks, and they'll match in space. So it'll be a much more intuitive and realistic experience. Okay, so they're gone now, and it disappears, and then I can basically press the trigger and move on to the next one. Actually, at the OMSI, I'm not going to give them that luxury because I don't want them dawdling. They've got about 5 or 6 minutes to go through all the sequences and move it on to the next. I figured we'll get about 100 people in about a 6 to 8 hour time frame. In fact, I'm planning on doing like a 5 or 10 minute briefing in the beginning so that I don't have to train them every time we put them in it. So there, yeah, look at the sun there. Oh, it's a little bright. So one of the things I did is I added a mask that provides a little bit of like a dust on the helmet. And then plus, as you can see, you've got your bokeh glare effect. To really give you the feeling you're here. I'd say I've got about 1,000 hours in this thing since I started in January, late January, and it just kept. It was like, you know, as I say, a project of passion here. It's just, it got better, and I said, man, I've got to add more stones. But yes, if you don't come off feeling like you're on the moon now, then I've failed.
Oh. I can't wait to get my hands on it. And then, so after the presentation's complete, are you going to try and release this to the public?
I am. Essentially, it'll be available on Steam. I'm thinking probably the light version will be free, but if you want the full HTC Vive version that you can use the trackers and actually suit up, see my hands? I kind of did the quotes. If you can suit up, actually I can turn off my camera. There we go. You can suit up. You'll see the control panel for your life support system on your chest. You can switch it on, off the camera. You can move your legs so you can see your boots. You can kick items on the ground like large stones and they'll go flying. So you really get the feeling that you're in a suit and you're with your buddies helping them out. In fact, you actually do have to help them out. You have to align the reflectometers, because the reason they brought it here is so that they could beam a laser from the Earth, which is over there, look at it, down to the surface and then back to measure exactly how far, because they know obviously how fast speed of light works. They'll know exactly the distance. It's kind of like those laser measurers that you have, kind of the same principle, but obviously at a much larger or distance. So yeah, and you actually have to line it up so that they can do that. Now, I'm not going to create this huge red beam that comes down, because clearly if it was on during the time, I didn't see it. And more than likely it was an infrared, but I don't know. It could have been visible. I'd have to look into that. So that's the cool thing, is that all the research I've done in order to duplicate it, like, did you know and this is good for you, we work with Kapton tape, right?
Yep.
I remember the old day. Guess what? You see all those little bands around the legs of the lunar module? They held the foil in with Kapton tape. And in fact, I think it's Mattel, you can buy an authentic pin, well, or at least a 50th anniversary pin that in the tip of it, there's a little piece of the actual Kapton tape from the command module. So I made sure I put plenty of Kapton tape on the lunar module. It was like, it really was like, what's the saying? String and baling wire or something. Yeah, the lunar module was kind of like that. In fact, it was so frail that it was made specifically to be used in space only and on the moon. It would not support itself in Earth gravity. And it literally kept itself together. It was like thick cardboard and aluminum foil that it's kept its shape through an aluminum frame and the pressure inside. So little trivia there. So it doesn't actually, you can't really use it. And the ones that you see in museums are actually simulators. I do think there's one, I can't remember, I think at the Kennedy, that is actually a version like the one you see in front of me that never went into space. It was kind of like a, so they do have one. So there you go. Okay.
That's
hang
amazing.
on. I'm coming in.
Okay.
Well, I can get the right mouse here.
And where did you get your spacesuit?
Actually, I looked for this. This is actually a sweatshirt, but they make hoodies, and they imprinted what was the suit onto a t-shirt. And since you do this kind of stuff for a living, or I mean, your family does, so you're probably familiar with the process. But guess where it came from?
Where?
One guess: China.
Yeah, well, so does pretty much all of our
yeah, I know.
textiles,
but So, and what's funny is that the actual website looked very American, but then I realized, oh, I'm getting the actual what I would get from Alibaba or something like that. So it takes about a week to get this. It was about $30, but I also got some sweatpants, which are also imprinted with the spacesuit. So you know, I can go to bed feeling, and then and then I got these caps.
The cap is like a sushi bar. You look like you're gonna serve up some sushi on the
Hello. Well, actually, if you go back and look at some of the pictures that they had, they wore, and I actually will be wearing this when I'm at the OMSI, these coveralls, this full jumpsuit type thing with these kind of hats. I actually have a different one than this. It's a little bit more like it with patches. So I'll be kind of like the technician or the scientist helping these, you know, our patrons feel like they're really going to the moon.
Yeah.
And then some of the other volunteers will be wearing, it won't be as nutty as me. They'll be wearing like your white lab coat. So yeah, I found some on Amazon for $12.99. So it's inexpensive. And I'll show you the boots. And our patrons, I have 4 sizes, will be able to don a lunar boot. If you notice, here's the Vibe tracker, and it tracks your foot. And then you have one on your waist that tracks your lower spine. And then your controllers are your arms. And the person made that, I don't remember his last name. His name is Yuri, not Yuri Gagarin, but maybe he's a relative. But Yuri, he's actually from Russia. He's developed this plugin for Unreal that allows you to do motion capture. And so he's worked with me, and we've kind of modified it so it actually can work in real time, as you could see in the little earlier video. That's available. It's our first promo video. But yeah, it's hard to describe. I mean, if you need a reason to come to Portland for the summer, I highly recommend it. So actually, in saying that, I know that I've only basically have one setup. That's all the space they've given me for. And I really wanted to make this like a 30-foot so you could really explore a little bit. But I've only got a 12 by 12 space. That's why there are 5 sequences that you fade in, fade out in. And you can walk around a little bit, but obviously not much. But you'll be able to, as I said, pick up rocks, do things like that. But I will probably only be able to get 100 in a day. And they've only got 2 days, as I mentioned to you. So we have what they call the VR Cafe in the Washington Square Mall. They've got 4 Vive setups to play games and so forth, and then a back room for more professional. And they're using the HTC Vive Pros. So they've got a really nice setup. And then plus they just got in a racing simulator that you wear a VR headset in with a professional type steering wheel. So they're all set up. They're going to get it Encore Experiences on July 21st. So just looking up the VR Cafe in Washington Square Mall. So if you are in the area, look them up. They've told me, because I'm kind of giving this, not kind of, I'm giving it to them for free, that they will provide the experience for free. You may have to buy an hour to play with something else or a drink, because they are actually a cafe, but you will be able to experience it for free. And but there you got all the VR games
in Washington
No,
Square.
in Portland, in Washington Square Mall in Portland. It's actually on the border of Tigard, Portland, and Beaverton.
Huh. To check that out. It sounds
But
fun.
I know I'm all excited about this, and it's still almost 2 months away. But the other exciting news today, guys? Chris is back. Yes, Chris is back.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back, Mike. I thank you for reaching out to me and inviting me back on. The podcast has always been such a great part of my Friday. For I don't know, we were together for how long were we?
About 3 years. We started in the end of 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of fell apart a little bit when I moved here, which was at the end of 2016. We did a couple of shows, but as you mentioned, you had some other things going on. I just thought you hated me and politics, and said I got to get away from that guy.
No, not at all. It's scheduling's always tough. Running a business and having a busy personal life. It definitely makes it hard. Scheduling is definitely always a challenge, but I'm happy to be here today, and I look forward to hopefully being a guest in the future.
Well, we talked about, since I don't have a lot of time, just doing this monthly. So I'd love to have you on monthly. I cover the VR stuff, some of the design tools, but man, you're in the trenches with the 3D fabrication. And on that note, you just went to Maker Faire, is that correct?
Yeah. So we had
the Maker Faire.
Yeah. So I don't remember if this is my 6th or 7th Maker Faire. I've been going every year and haven't missed a year. I go with the in-laws and the nephews, and they're always fired up and excited to be there. So that's really kept the passion and the spirit alive at Maker Faire. That's really what it's all about, is getting the kids inspired and kind of getting them involved in STEM education and the maker movement, and kind of getting them hands-on. The Maker Faire is an amazing place to teach your kids a lot of skills. They have like skill building workshops. They have a huge Google partners with them, and they have a huge soldering station where you can go in and you can do a simple soldering project, and they without any soldering experience. If you've never soldered before, and it's a real simple exercise. They give you a little pin. It's completely free, sponsored by Google, and it's a really cool little thing they do every year. And every year it's a little bit different. And this year was awesome. They also had a breadboard section that was tremendous. So if you've never been to Maker Faire, or you've never and you're thinking about it next year, I encourage anybody to go, because it's just a really fun deal. I did notice there was definitely some corporate sponsors missing this year. This year we did get rained on pretty heavily the day I was there, and I think the second day as well. So a lot of the outdoor stuff got canceled. It's just it's kind of weather dependent for the outdoor stuff, because there's a lot of electronics, so people don't really want to have their electronics sitting out in the pouring rain. So this is the first year that I've actually seen heavy rain during May. So being a wet year in California, it was,
climate change.
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah.
Well, that word again. So actually, we've had a lot of rain too, but I am in Portland, Oregon. So on that note, you did say it was kind of light lately, and I asked you if where you're at, San Luis Obispo is still doing their Maker Faire. The sad thing is, I think, at least from the consumer perspective, it's kind of dying a little bit, or actually kind of died. And we're just seeing the hardcore hobbyists and professionals cling on to the 3D fabrication, which to me makes sense. Not everybody's going to be a woodworker and buy the more elaborate tools. So I think 3D fabrication is the same thing. If you're a hardcore maker, you'll have a 3D printer, and And I think, as we found out before, the media has a tendency to sensationalize things. Same thing can be said for VR and augmented reality. So I knew it was coming, but the fact is, you obviously are still in business, so that's a good sign for the industry.
Yeah, yeah, and I've transitioned a lot of the business portion. Definitely still thrives in bridge manufacturing. It definitely. I always knew that would be kind of maybe a part of the business, but it's really become kind of the bread and butter. It's bridge manufacturing, so it's in between prototyping and mass production, which is this kind of like middle ground where somebody might need 200 or 500 of something. They don't necessarily, they know they might change the design, and they may need to, and they don't necessarily want us to pay for the tool. That's, if it's going to be injection molded or blow molded or whatever. They don't want to pay for this really expensive tool. And they're also finding that there's not a lot of market resistance anymore. People are completely, I think 3D printing, that's one thing that has been nice about the fact that it did get, it trended for a few years, is the fact that now 3D printed parts are pretty normalized. You're seeing them in everyday life. A lot of things you're buying at retail, whether it's on Amazon or whatever electronics you're buying. A lot of times you're getting a 3D part and you don't even know it, or you're getting a 3D part and the consumer doesn't really care that much, especially if it's like a part that might be inside of something, like on the interior, it's not on the exterior. So yeah, so like bridge manufacturing is definitely, I think, still growing. It's a segment of the 3D printing that's still growing. But yeah, you're right. They're the kind of the hobbyists, the kids maybe aren't quite as excited. They got excited about VR and 3D printing for a bit there. But I think there's still buzz around it, and I think there's still a lot of improvements in the technology, and I think it's just kind of moving a little slower. But yeah, that's my opinion.
No, and the whole 3D is, I like to say, all things 3D. Yeah, we're seeing movements in all these areas. There was a big flash in the pan, but I think it's stabilizing, and I think it's a prerequisite in education now that people understand it and move on. I know I look silly over here, but
in your sushi hat.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I won't go that way. Okay. All right. So you've got some updates for me, right?
Yeah, for sure. So,
So I've got here, I'm going to put it up on the screen. You've got this 3D lab print. What is this?
Yeah. So 3D lab print, I don't know if I touched on this before, but in a previous podcast, but I've been following them for quite some time. And if you click under airplanes up at the top, so what 3D lab print,
they says browse airplanes.
Yeah, so there you go. Click on that. Yeah, click on that, and we can. So these are all 3D printable designs.
Wow.
And they actually include simplified 3D slicer configurations.
Oh, cool.
So this is kind of for a more advanced, I would say intermediate to advanced 3D print user. And what they are is they're models that are, these are RC airplanes that are designed to be 3D printed. And and you can you print them in sections. They're made for a printer that is the size of a Prusa or bigger.
Okay.
So the Prusa MK3 or it actually MK2.5 I think is the one that most of the profiles are built for. But they have specifically made profiles for simplified 3D.
I need to make sure I've got you on. Okay, so I didn't have my screen. Sorry, audience. Now I've got it up.
Okay, there we go. So you'll see. So these models, they not only have planes, they have RC boats and some other models. Okay. And I don't know if all of them are meant for RC or actually functional. The one I am always working on now is a Cessna model. And so I've added the latest Prusa MK3S in my office. Great little, and it's a great little printer. That thing really, talk about a quality machine. You know, it required a little bit of kind of tinkering out of the box. When you put, not quite as easy as the low spot machine or an Ultimaker. When you pull it out, it takes a little bit of maybe calibration, a little bit more. It's nothing an experienced person would even worry about. But for like a new person, it might be a little bit tricky. So, anyways, I've been working on a Cessna plane. Yeah, so printing the sections, you print all these sections, and then you piece them together with an ABS weld or
do you remember
PLA.
Cox gasoline planes? Do you ever remember those?
I don't.
Okay, I guess I'm showing my age. So back when I was about 10 or 11, I had this one, the Supermarine Spitfire by Cox, and it had a little two-stroke little one-cylinder engine, and you put gas, you primed it, and you spun it, and it just started going, and it had a little tank in it, and you could get maybe 5 minutes, but it had a little control wire, and you basically
I
the center,
those.
And you
I do remember those. I do remember those.
Needless to say, I think.
So these ones all have you put a quadcopter brushless motor in them with a normal ESC. So it's like you can take, like if you crashed a quadcopter, you know,
just use your parts.
Just use your parts that you've already got. So that's what I have. I have a boneyard of these things, you know, of these quadcopters. So I've got a whole boneyard. So yeah, so you can see some of the parts, and they're real thin wall. These parts are made to have 1 or 2 perimeters. So there keeps the weight way down.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Now, clearly, this Cox model was all plastic, but it was injected molded. But I knew some of the people who had larger ones, their wings were essentially framed, and then they used this special type of paper over the top of them to keep the weight really down. I'm showing again my age.
1 perimeter of PLA, you know. So and that's why you really got to have your settings kind of dialed in. For the parts, but for this model, I'm using Amazon Basics 24.95, just regular Amazon Basics PLA, just to test it, to see what can be done with the cheapest filament, you know, and how well it'll fly, and how, you know, it's kind of a good model to really put the Prusa to work and kind of test its limitations. Yeah, so that's one thing I've been working on.
Well, I noticed there's one model that seems to be missing, and I'll tell you a little story about it. It's the Stuka. You remember the Stuka? Had the very unusual, the dive bomber. That was when you said that you had the Cox Stuka. You were the cool guy. I don't, and you were even cooler if you could actually fly it, because it was somewhat of an unstable design.
Wing, got it.
It became very temperamental to fly, and most people had it and then destroyed it like the first time they used it. So if you saw one up and running many times, that guy was a pro in flying them. I mean, I don't know if you can call moving around in a circle flying, but
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, and there's 2 more pages of planes that they have.
Yeah, and I've been scrolling through those. Very cool. So let's look. You've got CircuitPython. What's that? Yeah.
So I don't know if you've been following like the Arduino world very much and playing with Arduinos at all. You know, I still continue to use these things. Now. I still continue to use these things on a daily basis, playing with Arduino, weather sensors, the particle boron now, which is like their new set of mesh. I've been getting into LoRa, which is like the long-range radio stuff. And really what lately has been kind of blowing me away has been CircuitPython. So CircuitPython's been around for about 6 years. I think they just had their 6th birthday. And they just released CircuitPython 4. What CircuitPython and Arduino, CircuitPython is meant to be it's a kernel of Python that runs on microcontrollers, and there's certain ones that run a kernel of Python, like, so it has a full stack of Python built on. Yeah, so here you see, this is a project that Adafruit has put together, and it's $55, which, so it's not the cheapest thing, but it has a you know, onboard Wi-Fi. It's got I believe that's a touch screen. I haven't used the touchscreen functionality, but it has a screen built onto it, full color. And then it's got their board. If you look at the board, the actual circuit board, it's got this board that has that runs CircuitPython. And so what CircuitPython and Arduino, how they differ is, you, instead of running an IDE on your computer like you do with Arduino, and you program, you write your program and you save it directly on your computer, and then you flash, you know, it compiles it and flashes the unit with a compiled version of your program.
Right.
CircuitPython's different. CircuitPython, you plug it into your computer and a drive shows up on your computer similar to a flash drive. And then you open up your code in Python, which I don't know if you've gone down the Python rabbit hole, but man, Python is just a tremendously easy language to understand and program in. So much more easy, in my opinion, than Arduino and a lot of the other programming languages.
Well,
Python is just the one that you learn. That's like a good language to learn, like right when you're learning, right? And Arduino is too, but I think Python a lot more so. So anyways,
well, the other important thing is that it's a structured scripting language, and it has, what would you call it, so many functions that make the whole process easy. And if you've had any programming, which I'm assuming some of our audience has, if you work with C or anything else where you have to build a lot of your libraries and functions, that's not the case with Python. There's pretty much either something built in or something you can grab that does basically everything you want. It's a language that's used a lot in the science community, and I think it's starting to see some more penetration in the education market because, as you said, it's easy, but it is still a full function language where, you know, sadly, the IDE and now I've already forgotten that normally drives these boards is a limited subset, and it's made mainly for real-time controlling, so you don't get the power of a full Python. So yes, very cool.
Yeah. So and Adafruit has been investing a tremendous amount of resources into building out libraries to scale this up, so that these boards now can do a lot of the same things that the Arduino can. So all the libraries are scaling at a super fast rate. So if you look at like kind of the growth curve of the libraries for Arduino, they've kind of tapered off a bit. Arduino has kind of like reached maturity, whereas CircuitPython is, you know, they're onboarding libraries every day. There's tons of libraries being written, and they're in Python, so they're easier to understand, easier to read. So I encourage anybody that's into microcontrollers, if you haven't dipped your feet in with to the CircuitPython, definitely check it out because it's really fun. It's really easy.
Do you have one of these?
Yeah, so I made my own. It's a,
you got it there with you?
I do. It's sitting over on a desk over here.
Go grab it.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay.
It's plugged in, so I can't. I don't want to unplug it. But it's basically a little.
So it's a 5-inch screen.
It's the same. It's one of these. I bought the Pi Portal, the same kit. They actually have an Adafruit box version that kind of came with some extra freebies, and I think it was the same price. If you go to Adafruit and you scroll up and you go to their AdaBox kit, so if you go to the top here and you go shop, or you up at the top, the very top there, it says AdaBox.
Actually, mine says Memorial Day.
Yep. Go up.
Oh, I see. No.
Go up.
We're
up. Like
I'm up.
Yeah. Okay. Left.
Okay. I have learn blog forums.
Learn blog forums, videos, AdaBox.
Oh.
There it is. Click on AdaBox. Yeah. So this is AdaBox has Adafruit puts together a box. They do like a monthly subscription program, but you don't have to do the subscription, you can just buy one, and I think you pay like $5 or $10 more to not be on the subscription model. That's what I do because I don't need 12.
Okay.
Or actually, I think they do these quarterly. So they're doing them on the quarter now. So if you click Get Started.
So it sounds like a great birthday or Christmas gift for a nephew or a niece.
Exactly, and that's why they have a Give and Ada box. And so, and usually the components that are inside the box are worth vastly more at retail than what you pay for the monthly subscription, obviously. So or the quarterly subscription. So they make it worth your while. And but like I said, you can also buy the Ada box after the fact. And I found that, like, you know, if you want a project, these are sometimes, if you want to just dip your feet into CircuitPython, they have some great deals on here to get an Ada box. And I really like the PyPortal. The PyPortal has a lot of flexibility. You could do a lot with it. It's kind of like a Raspberry Pi. You know, it's just another thing, another tool in your tool chest that you can learn how to do something different with, and kind of check it out and learn something along the way, because there's a lot of learning you can do. So.
Very cool. All right, as you noticed, I pushed to your screen, but you see what the other screen is. I'm moving you along.
Yeah, I'm on the Onshape. Yeah, so Onshape back. I'm still
come down a little bit. Yeah, you blew out my ears there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm still loving Onshape. Working in Onshape every single day. Doing my CAD designs all in Onshape for client work and personal, and just really love Onshape. It's just been a tremendous value for me.
Yeah, I had him on. I had the guy that I can't think of his name, darn sorry. But the guy we've had on before, he came back on because I'm not a big fan of Magic Leap. So I kind of said, yeah, you got a kind of a vaporware program. Boy, were they on top of that. So they came on and kind of gave me an overview of what's new in Onshape. But a cool feature is, and I don't know if they have the name here, but Onshape is a tool that works with Magic Leap. So not only can you create your 3D item, but you can actually don your Magic Leap, what do you want to call it, headband, glasses, and work with others collaboratively within Onshape. Now, I don't know if that's available yet, but so yeah, it's cool. I sadly stuck with Fusion 360 because it's
Fusion 360 is still a great product. They also have a great product, and it really I think if you're just a home CAD user or you're just working on one-on-one, Fusion 360 is a really safe bet. You know, as long as you can get the job done, that's all that matters. That's my motto, you know. And
well, the other point is, I still have the full version for free.
Your grandfathered in, yeah.
Yeah. So the Onshape here has here's your pricing on it. I think you can get your standard is $1,500, professional is $2,100, and if I remember correctly, there is also a student educator plan. So if you're a student or educator, make sure you look into it, because I think it's free, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So the student educator plan is if you don't care that other people see your work, you can use Onshape for free, and it still is remaining free for learning. So you can register an account as long as you don't care that other people might be able to see your work.
Yeah. So as I think they call it, public, whereas if you buy the license, you have private. And there's a few other features that are different, but
very similar business model to GitHub. So GitHub, the largest code repository in the world, is free for public use, and they contribute more probably than any.
It's a little different. Like $7.95 is what I pay for my professional GitHub.
Sure. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of difference.
There's a difference in the tool.
But yes,
as well, yeah.
Agreed. So if you need a professional tool, again, not knocking Onshape, they've come a long way, and clearly you're a pro in it, and maybe you should come on and give us a little tutorial one day. Okay, so let's move on. Man, the big item here is you have a Prusa SLA printer?
No, I just wanted to cover that's kind of like the latest, greatest thing that was at Maker Faire in the 3D printing realm, or 3D technology that I saw. There was a few items at Maker Faire that might be noteworthy, but I think the biggest noteworthy thing was to see hands-on the SLA machine that the SL1 that Prusa is offering.
I'm gonna bring it up right now.
Yeah, and so this is Prusa's open source SL1 printer.
That's not a bad price.
Oh, it's an amazing printer for the price. I think this thing's going to blow pretty much every SLA machine out of the water.
Really? You think so?
Yeah. It outperforms most of the professional grade SLA machines I've seen.
Wow.
As far as SLA goes, you know, SLA is a finicky process. I mean, as you know, right? And I have a Form 2, and
which is even a step up from what I had, so you can imagine the frustration I had.
Yeah, resin printing is tricky. There's a shelf life to the resins. There's there's definitely the support removal part and the software generation.
Well, what do you mean by shelf life? You mean as far as when it's in its viscous form or the actual tint? Because the only thing that I've noticed so far is, especially if you go with a clear, there's a yellow tinting.
Yeah, so both. The parts themselves do have a shelf life. Dimensional stability fades over time, so parts will start to warp, especially outdoors, or if they're exposed to UV, like sitting out in a sunny room or a room that has any UV exposure. The parts will start to kind of degrade. Their geometric, tolerance starts to degrade.
Well, and that's important because that's one of the strengths of SLA is its mechanical accuracy, and if that starts to distort over time. But normally, at least in my case, it was a go-to thing for quick prototype parts for fit, finish, and then you moved on to not SLA,
FDM.
Well, not FDM, the other one, the nylon. Geez, it's been a while.
SLS,
sintering. And then I guess there's another one. The HP has really come on, which is an FDM process, but that's come a long way too.
The HP is a polyjet.
A polyjet, that's right. Which seems to have come along too as being a go-to.
Yeah. I've seen some parts that come off the HP.
They're pretty quiet.
Yeah, really great. I don't know if I'd want to run one myself. It's the machines. I've seen the machines up close and personal, and at least in their infancy. You know, I think it's really early on, but it won't be long before they have a desktop machine. No,
but they're made for something like what you're doing, or something like, I think Shapeways has them, and Sculptial or Sculptress has them, and in fact, I think a Sculptress was one of the first to use them. Their parts are about, I think, 25% more than using your standard SLS nylon, but I got one or two components. They seem to be a little bit lighter in weight with the same strength. So if you need something that's a little bit more durable and weight, I would just... So this, I'm getting off track here, sorry, Chris, but this looks pretty neat.
And then they also, alongside this, one of the coolest parts is that they have their own Prusa curing and washing machine that's all in one. You don't need two devices. And this thing supposedly works really well. The parts that I saw that came off the machine and went through this looked fantastic. So
now, is that included in the $15.99?
No, that's a separate machine, but I think it's $600 for the curing and washing.
So for about $2,200, you can have a complete SLA. When I think the Form 1 I bought was used, I got for $3,500. And
the Form 3 now, they have the Formlabs has their Form 3.
Right.
And I think the pricing went way up on that. I think it's $3,500 for a Form 3, and that doesn't include the curing or the washing. I have both the automated washing and curing stations, and those I think were each $500, $600.
Wow. And one other thing on that, you said that you had ordered, didn't Formlabs come out with an SLS?
So I was on the pre-order list for the Fuse one, but
what happened to it?
never delivered. So I never saw it. I had put money hard. I had put $1,000 down, and I have yet to hear where they are with this delivering on the delivery schedule. I think they found out really quickly that SLS is a much bigger challenge than they probably thought in the beginning. SLS is easier to tackle. SLS, there's a lot of moving parts there that are a lot more difficult to.
Well, and I'm also thinking that the patents are probably a little bit more secure than they. I mean, you remember all the problems they had with their SLA, so I would have to.
Yeah, well, so I think that's what happened. One of the reasons they started going into SLS is what happened was they settled with 3D Systems over the SLA patent, and they ended up basically taking on partnership, I believe, with like Ari, who's the leader of 3D Systems, and basically I think figured out, okay, we can share information and we can basically license the technology. I'm not really sure of the internal. I'm just speculating, but that's what it seems like to me.
Well, it's yeah, I haven't heard much news on it, and I know that you had one on pre-order. Okay, let's move on to this. What is this?
Oh, heat set inserts. Okay, so these are I don't know how much inserts you've done with 3D prints or injection molded parts, but I thought it was worth mentioning. This is something that I've really started getting into is using heat set inserts in parts, whether they're heat set or some of them are press fit, so like you can press them in, or some of them are expansion inserts. You can buy them for pretty cheap on anywhere, Amazon, AliExpress, McMaster, even Adafruit offers them.
I designed a component for the specialized airsoft gun with a tracker on it so that you could use it as a realistic simulation. I was creating a active shooter simulator, and I wanted it to be extremely realistic than what you may have seen. So yes, I did this by hand. So this would have been very useful for me.
Yeah, so Adafruit has come up with, and I know they reference kind of like one of the guy that kind of came up with this design, but it's a benchtop rig that's mostly 3D printed parts. It uses an aluminum extrusion for the upright portion, and then you just put your soldering iron, and Adafruit sells brass tips that go on the end of a soldering iron. And then this is counterweighted with that pulley at the top. And so you can very accurately and quickly do press fit inserts. So I'm definitely in the process of building my own right now for a couple of projects that require press fit inserts. Because the press fit inserts are definitely a lot. They require kind of like some hammering or a press. And with 3D printed parts, this is just much more practical. And I feel like the inserts themselves have a lot more lifespan.
No, and also obviously all you're doing is deforming with heat to secure it, where the other one, you may not survive the impact.
Right. So
okay.
Yeah, so it's a great project.
Man, Steve, where you been? I need all these kind of things.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Okay, so I'm going to get more into the ethereal end of it. So you may or may not be aware of this. NVIDIA has released a series of cards called the RTS cards that do real-time ray tracing. And the big thing is the Unreal Engine 4.22 makes it super easy to do RTS. In fact, if you don't even have one of the new RTS cards, their latest NVIDIA drivers, if you've got one of the 1070s or 1080s, I think it even works at a 1060, will allow you to do ray tracing as well. Clearly, you're not going to get the performance, but if you want to try it, it's there. So one of the things that I wanted to use it for is obviously VR, but also I do a lot of frame-by-frame, what do you want to call it, cinematic sequences in Unreal. So they don't have to be real-time, but I found that they're much quicker than using other tools for rendering. So I've kind of basically been a go-to guy for Unreal the last year and a half. So here is a little article from NVIDIA on how to get started, what you need to get moving with it, and some of the features in order to look at performance. And then these are command line features that you can set. But a lot of these things now, when you go into, and I don't know if they talk about it here, it's like you can actually set them up in blueprints, but you can switch between the two, meaning your standard cascading or this. But the other thing that really caught my eye was, and you can watch this, it's about an hour long if I remember correctly. Yeah, it's 39 minutes, but this was a webinar that they had several visualization teams from, I think, Canada as well, US, show how they were using this in order to create visualizations for architectural work, planning work, and just not only the visual eye candy, like here's some urban planning, but the optimization, like this scene here, they would turn things on and off, or the comparison of cascade light systems versus real time. And they found that some things like shadows and reflections perform better than the cascade version. Not only look better, but actually perform better. So because this is a hybrid system, you can use, let's say, just maybe real-time shadows or just reflections. So you don't have to use the whole kit and caboodle, as they say. And you could probably get away with using some of these in VR, especially if you're not really needing a high demanding 90 frames action type thing, but for visualization, you could probably get away with it. So this is something I'm going to be exploring when I get I'm going to get an RT 2070, which is about the equivalent of a 1080. So it's not a top end card, but to start
it has ray
exploring
tracing built into it.
Yep, well, it has optimized. Like I said, if you've got a 1070 or 1080, again, I don't know if it works with a 1060, you can explore it. You're just not going to get the frame rate you would with an RTS card. So, you know, I have, and I love it, and it's not that difficult, and this gives you some ideas of how to set it up. And I played with it a little bit, and I explored it to add some of those features in Apollo 11, One Small Step 4 VR experiences. But it's not really worth it. I used a lot of hard shadows because, you know, there was no atmosphere. So, and I have noticed, though, I've had to temper some of that down because I get some artifacts, especially on the landscape, which is super huge. In fact, if you had enough space, you would be able to walk. I think I have about 10 kilometers worth of space. Now it's obviously more detailed around the lunar module, but you could walk into craters.
You're ready for one of those omnidirectional treadmill things.
No, because then you wouldn't be able to walk into a crater. But it could. So one of the things I wanted to do at the OMSI, but because it was limited space, and I wanted them to be able to see like what they call the Little West Crater, which is the last place Neil Armstrong was that he took some images with his Hasselblad, is I wanted you to actually experience that. So the terrain differs depending on where you're at. And I actually use NASA topography as a model in order to create my landscape and then built upon that. So the terrain is fairly accurate. Problem is that accuracy was good for, was it 50 meters? So if you know what 50 meters looks like, clearly that was a large area. And so I had to go even more detailed. So then I basically had to put in a bunch of smaller craters myself, approximately where they were at. So it's not exact, but the larger 10 meter or 10 kilometer area is very similar. But besides that point, this is cool. There's a nice little video, and it's a feature you can play with now if you've got some of the earlier cards, but that's been out for a little bit. But this little video is what kind of sold me on the quality and the ease of use. So just go ahead. I know you keep laughing. Okay, I'll get you some sushi, Chris. Just hang on. Okay, so let's see what else we got. I think we'll go right into 3D and medicine, right? So So I've got one item here. Now I keep covering this. Obviously, I have a little bit of interest in 3D fabrication, and it's funny since you remember in 2014 when I 3D printed somebody's skull, and next thing you know,
I remember.
Everybody was doing it, and I am so glad. I mean, we're seeing not only Europe, Asia, but even the United States has made a lot of progress in this area. But
You're
this is
leading the
cool.
way.
I don't know. I don't lead the way anymore on that. But the whole point is I feel like I had a part in it.
Yeah.
So this here is really cool because if you remember, we talked to some guys out at Rice University, and they said in creating scaffolding for tissue, the main hurdle is creating a vascular system to provide nutrients and remove waste so that the tissue survives. Remember that? So I've been kind of keeping my eye on it. So this is vascularized kidney tissue, which, as you know, is basically a large filter with a lot of vascular functionality in it. And it looks like they may have cracked the solution here. Now, it's funny, this Winston-Salem, so this is what, I can't remember what university, but I think they have been kind of in competition with Rice. I've heard their name before. But they're using, I read this somewhere else and had it listed, they use a collagen process and a what do they call it? I keep pronouncing it. It's hydrogen, something like that. I even looked it up. But essentially they use like a goo and then they process the scaffolding in it and then evaporate it kind of, and it leaves just the scaffolding. And so they're obviously working more and more with this process in order to create a more intricate. And once you can do that and then remove it, then you have your vascular system that you can use in order to run fluids through it. So cool article. I was looking for a little bit more, didn't find any, but if you've never been out to Eureka Alert, they've got a lot of things, and there's probably more information on the actual paper if you want more detail, but for now, super cool. And I think that's something to kind of look forward. We're going to be able to 3D fabricate using our own stem cells, our own organs.
Yeah. Wow. That blows me away. We live in the future.
We live. Yeah, as long as we don't let certain people prevent certain things from happening that all mankind will benefit from. Okay, enough from that perspective. So what else do I got here? Oh, let's move right into 3D scanner. You remember this, Chris? Huh? Dun, da, da. Actually, I'll start with the reboot the suit.
Yeah. Did this actually happen? Did they actually do it?
They're very close. Actually, I think they've got it done. That they're holding off. I think it's like the 16th, like a week before, I think. Actually, if you read the article, I'll get back to it. But this is the Kickstarter. If you remember, if you joined up, man, do I kick myself that I didn't spend a little bit more so I could actually have the glove. Dummy me, not spending $15 more, but because I need the glove now. And I would have used that in order to create my own. But
so
the good news,
they're making a copy of it?
Well, there's a couple of things. So as you remember, they were going to preserve it, 3D scan of it, and then put it back on display. So one of the things they promised is, and they've already done this with the glove, but it's not available yet, they're going to make available, like many of the models out there at Smithsonian, for you to review, and for us geeks who want the full 3D model of the suit, they're going to make that available. And that is identified in this article in the Smithsonian.com. And remember, we actually did the interview with Vince Rossi. So I got in touch with him letting him know about my project. So I'm kind of pestering him to see if I can get this 3D scan, because I have two other features that will be present. One is an AR or AR goggle. It's actually going to be the Dream Glass that you'll be able to walk around the suit. Now, the guy I've worked with in, I think he's from the Netherlands, Alban, Netherlands, who built that magnificent suit that you were watching that I rigged and modified so it was more lunar based. He is an excellent 3D artist. So I kind of put him in touch with them, and maybe between the three of us, we can have a solution by July 20th. But if not, my suit is good. But here you're seeing they were using photogrammetry techniques. But you can read the article. It's great. And more importantly, later on, it tells you that they're going to make the models available to view, like Sketchfab, that you can, turn and manipulate, but also provide the actual mesh file to download. And so part of my goal, if this is available beforehand, is that that's what we're going to use to create the 3D model. And I'll say it right now, and I'll put Chris back on the screen. I've asked Chris to be one of 2 3D fabricators for, again, Apollo 11, One Small Step for VR experiences. And what it will entail is that we'll create a small 6 to 8 inch action figure, and he's going to print the colorless version, and I'm working with Sketchfab as I did with us to create the sandstone version, but it will be a little bit more expensive. And I don't know how big Chris can make it, but Chris is going to offer some pricing and materials so that it'll be part of the brochure and on my website. So if you come to the OMSI, again, why wouldn't you? We'll 3D scan your face, provide you a model that you can insert into the cavity of the helmet and make yourself a highly realistic astronaut. Now you'll have to create your own little label for your suit, but so I've asked Chris to be the sole provider of the colorless 3D. So, and he said he would do it. So we'll talk about that more later. But obviously, the more realistic the model, the better, so that we can kind of whittle it down to a easier to print model so that we can get these out. And, you know, Chris, I'll leave the pricing up to her, but in my own experience, especially with working with Shapeways, creating a 4-inch was about $50. So I'd say about a 6 to 8 inch is going to be about $75 to $100, but that'll be full color. But I'm thinking a version that's something you could paint yourself if you wanted to, or just have a little statue will be less from Chris.
Yeah.
And Chris will have the Apollo discount for that particular day. Okay, so let's move on. So these links, as always, will be in the show notes. It's probably either today or early tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and I need to chime in about scanning. You know,
scanning, that's right. You did have an item. Scanning
has been finally making some headway, in my opinion. Being in the industry, and I want to love scanning, and I want scanning, but there just hasn't been a lot of great products that can generate a good, like, clean data for CAD, right? I mean, and the systems that are out there that can do that are just astronomically expensive. But there are some really, really great desktop solutions now. There's even some open source solutions that are finally have hit, and I'm working with them now. I'm kind of playing with them, so I'll be excited to share that hopefully in a month or so. Some of the latest, what's going on.
Chris, I kind of tuned out a little bit because I'm moving on to the next. We are trying to be a producer, and a participant is hard sometimes for an old guy like me. But back to the point. What type of 3D scanning are you talking about? Are these laser-based or photogrammetry-based?
There's a mix. There's actually a mix, and there's some great low-cost options that are kind of coming down the pipeline, I think. The one I'm personally working with right now is still a photogrammetry setup.
So is it a motorized turntable that you put something
motorized
on?
Turntable. And it uses open source software. There's some proprietary software that you can get that maybe improves the quality a little bit, but it's still low cost. But the models that you're left with, you know, because Autodesk discontinued that program I loved, Recap. So they ended up shelving the photogrammetry software that they came up. It was a cloud-based photogrammetry solution, and they kind of rolled it into a they're using it for GIS mapping and kind of topo stuff. It's really kind of not meant for small models, not meant for part scanning at all anymore. They kind of rolled it into a different product, and they discontinued Recap.
Well, that's kind of sad. I mean, obviously we spent some time exploring it, and I can't think of the name of it now. Something Capture is the one that all photogrammetrists use now. So, and it's not that expensive. And maybe we'll spend some time in a month talking about that specific area, because there are some low cost. I mean, if you've got a good camera, you have the patience, you can really create some top-end models. And as you remember, I created the $50 holiday turntable special, so you don't have to spend a lot of money on it. And I thought you were going to mention the other Autodesk product they had, which worked on a phone that they also discontinued. So since I can't think of his name now, left as CEO, they've kind of gone in a different direction, which is kind of disappointing. They were like the spearhead of the maker as far as tools and so forth, and I just don't hear a lot anymore. Okay, so let's move on. This is kind of great news if you're a VR person. Oculus has two products, and I'll basically start, I'll go to their page first. They have the Oculus Quest, which is a wireless component. So there's been two other components that have been out, but they've been more expensive. And I don't think the tracking was as good. One was a Daydream type device by, I want to say Lenovo. And then the other one was by HTC Vive, which never made it as a consumer product into this country. So this has been the option that everybody's been waiting for. And from what, I'll get back to the article in a minute, Road to VR thinks it is the best right now. And I think one of the reasons, and I talked about before, is because of the multiple cameras that allows more field of view for your hands and so forth. So now the downside from it, and again, I have not bought one yet because I'm a little consumed with the Moon right now, but I do plan to get one, is it only works with an 835 processor, which was the same processor that was used. But in saying that, I also have the Oculus Go, and I find that to be a great little $200 VR headset with its Snapdragon 820. So this, with an 835, with the Oculus, what do you want to call it? Android, I don't even know if it's an Android system. I think it is. Kernel is made to perform well with this, so I have a feeling it's going to work good. But obviously, it's still mobile. You're not going to get the quality you will of a desktop, so that's why they came up with the Oculus Rift S. A lot of controversy with the Oculus Rift S because it doesn't really give you that much of a leap over the one that you own, Chris.
I sold mine.
Oh, well, then
I'm out. I couldn't deal with the wire, the wire, and I mean it's got to go to the phone. It's got to be a thing that you put your phone in. I mean, it really does. Because I mean, I don't want to have. Yeah, I mean, I don't want the wire coming off. I don't want sensors. I want to be able to just pull it out. And yeah, really, I don't know. The content didn't wow me enough. Personally, this is my opinion, and I differ from other people. You know, other people love VR, but for me, it didn't wow me enough to. It wasn't worth the hassle of the headset at this point.
Well, and frankly, having owned several now and designed with them, I love the HTC Vive because I truly feel I have some mobility. More important, you said you don't want a wire. The HTC Vive has a wireless feature that's reasonably priced, and I don't have a wire. I have a battery pack I wear on my belt, and I can go anywhere I want in about a 15-foot radius.
And one of the other things that I noticed with your newest headset that you had on earlier is you called it mixed reality.
That was the Microsoft mixed reality type headset.
Yeah, and that's one thing I wish that these headsets had on them was like a little bar or a little scroll wheel on the side where you could just instantly go from VR to, you know, a mixed reality. Like you could basically turn the contrast and it would basically show you what's in your real world, so you can jump out without having to take the headset off and get your greasy head all over the lens. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Well, let's talk about it a little bit. One of the features on the Oculus Rift S is that it does have pass-through cameras. That's what you see on the front. Let me jump back to the screen.
Got it. Okay.
So even though it still hooks up to your desktop, it does have pass-through cameras. The other important thing is, you know, you get to set up those cameras on your desk. This version, you don't need to. It all works with what they call inside-out tracking. Remember, that was something that I was working with Occipital a long time ago, using their structure sensor. Well, everybody's doing it now. And it basically uses two, in this case, 4, to map out, and using parallax processing, create SLAM information so it knows where you're at in space. Microsoft was doing that for the last 2 years with their devices, but a lot of people complained you couldn't use your handsets back further than 180 degrees. And actually, I think it was even more limited than that. So we get back to not having any wires or the devices. The Oculus Quest might be your solution. It's only $400, and basically you put it on, you can go anywhere you want. You've got hand controllers, so everything works. You can do whatever you want. It's limited to the phone or the mobile chip in it, but a caveat, I've just been seeing some articles, they're using it kind of like a remote function to your PC. So you're still getting the horsepower of your PC, but it's driving the headset. So you're getting the best of both worlds. So some people are starting to explore that. With that Oculus Quest, I think is going to be a huge hit. One of the things that I had wouldn't say planned because the guy didn't have a budget for it, but we're going to go to sports bars and so forth and set these up and create like a leaderboard system so that they could play games in, you know, a 10 by 10 space while in the bar until you got drunk and you ran into walls, but that's another matter. But so that was something cool. And these are out. And then, as I mentioned, Road to VR, which Ben Lang, he's probably one of the best journalists in the VR. He appears to have some technical background. He always does very, I think, fair reviews. And if something he doesn't like, he does talk about it. But the Oculus Quest, turnkey system, you put on the headset, turn on your controllers, and you're up and going. It's probably very similar. Actually, it looks a little different than the Oculus Go, which is the lower end that does not have open space tracking. But here it is. He talks about it. You can read the article. But you said you wanted a killer app. Personally, I don't know why this is a killer app, but it appears Beat Saber is the app on VR. It's literally a rhythmic beat, and you have objects that you have to swing with your lightsabers.
I've seen it.
And so people really enjoy that. That's available on the Oculus Quest as well. So I could see something like that being done in a group type feature if you set up the monitors. They have made progress, so you can put it on a large monitor so people can see how you're working with. I can't remember, one of the late night hosts had the woman who plays Captain Marvel on playing Beat Saber, but they were probably, I don't know what engine they were using, but she was on a green screen, so it looked like she was inside it, playing inside the environment, which, as you know, I've done a few times on our previous podcast. So I thought it was kind of cool, and I could see the potential of this kind of thing bringing people into it, just like in the old days in the arcade. But lots of good reviews on it. As I said, I'm going to get one because I have some ideas on how to use it for psychotherapy. As we talked about, my Breath of a Forest, which I plan to release once I finish the Apollo, which allows you to immerse yourself in a forest, play with the animals. No, literally, I have deer in it now. To really give you something, and I see it working well in hospitals and other things, and this would be the type of device that would really sell it because it's easy to use. As you said, you don't have a PC to deal with. So there you go. If you need a reason to get back into it, try it out. I think they're going to have these at Best Buy. So
probably, I've seen them.
Okay, so that's, I think we're getting close, except maybe the Print Whisperer's got something for us?
The Print Whisperer doesn't have much today.
Okay, so let me jump into the tech closet and then we'll close the show. So I'm going to bring up so as you know, I'm a big fan of Unreal. You know, one main reason is you've got basically professional tools for how much? $0. No dollars at all. And you get, you know, I wouldn't say any real personal support, but there are a lot of support from other people. Any question I have or is basically answered. If not, you can always go to their forums and submit it. So what did it take to create the moon? Well, as I told, I'll zoom back and see if I can zoom out enough on this. It took a landscape, because one of the things that I found lacking some other simulators is that you didn't create enough lunar scape to get past the edges. So I wanted to ensure that I had enough space so that if you looked at the horizon, it seemed realistic. So that was one goal. The other is to ensure that my terrain looked realistic. There it is. That's from, and behind me is the Little West Crater. And that's the ALSCC there, this thing that I modeled in Fusion 360. finished it up in Blender, and then used 3D Coat. Remember, we talked about it, in order to add PBR textures for it. And let me see if I can get closer to it. I've got my scroll wheel set to really slow. So it's going to take a little while for Grandpa to get over to it. So there you go.
And what are those little things on the ground? Those are the rocks.
These little things are decals of footprints.
Oh,
so in order to, again, one, static meshes that you play, they don't play well on uneven terrains. These little decals project on objects, so they fit the terrain. More importantly, they're just little tiny textures, so it's like they're lightweight. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure is let me go ahead and do this, and then you can see, put them in game view so you don't. So they look like a bunch of footprints.
Wow.
And so it makes you feel like he was scurrying around. And then I also embedded in one of the textures on a larger scale impressions. Now they don't have the detail of the footprint, but it does look like somebody depressed the dirt. And if you notice, this area is a little almost like mud around the crater. But if we get back, and let me jump over to the lunar module. See, a little bit finer, because what happened is when they came down, they actually blew a lot of the dust and the upper surface. So it was a little bit smoother around this area. And here's another little crater next to it. And then there's you see the sphere there. The sphere is the interior of the LEM that I mapped into a 360 in order to reduce the number of polys in the model in order to make it perform well. And this thing requires at least a 1070 to run smoothly. And then there is, so there's my lunar module. It's I got the model somewhere. It was a very basic, so it's like taking a used car that like an old Corvette and then just completely redoing it. That's kind of what I did here. So I not only added more to the mesh, but I also redid all the textures to make them PBR and much more realistic. So when you actually go up to it, it looks like you're on the moon and the LEM is right there. So there's a lot of things that I either redid or basically designed from scratch. Let me go into one of my other. And the way this runs is there's a tool in Unreal that creates cinematics that you can either use to make your own videos, or you can have them run while you're in the experience. So I have, let me go to one real quick. Let's go to the one that we saw earlier with Nixon. Okay, so whoops. So they fade in just like a video, but then they also launch the actors that are part of that scene. And at the end of the scene, they disappear, and then you move on to the next scene. And it's all in the same environment. And then you're actually relocated to the next scene. And you fade to black so it's not too jarring for you, but it all keeps it within the same level, so everything works very quickly. And it keeps and since I'm not adding new meshes, in fact, I'm removing them and adding them when I need them, I'm actually lightening the load on the system. So there you go, there's my two models. In fact, I went as far as, if you go up, you can see Aldrin's name on the front of his pack there.
Yeah.
And so, and then oh no, I didn't realize that. Oh, I better go back. And I have one for Armstrong too, so I have to go back. Oh no, they're both Armstrong. Oh no, they're twins.
There's two of them.
So I did find a flag, but I didn't really like, so I designed my own because I wanted the actual bending of the flag and the type of structure to match what it looked like on the moon. And it's very close, and having the waves and so forth. And a lot of people think, if you're a disbeliever, that this didn't happen because the flag was waving. No, it was on a spring, and what happened is they weren't able to fully extend it, so it looked like it was blowing in the wind. Really, it was just, if you know anything about physics, you put something in motion, especially if you don't have any or little gravity and no atmosphere, it's going to kind of move for a while. And cool, because this is all based on 1/6 gravity, when you pick something up, you can throw it. And since there is no, other than the inertia of the mass of the object, there is no resistance to atmosphere because there isn't any. So things just kind of move. If you want to be a superhero, here's the chance, because you can throw things for miles. and it's fun as this thing, which was, and you can see it, I put one out here, you kind of launch over here, you can see a sliver of a helmet. The other thing I did in order to create a better illusion that you're in a spacesuit, even if you don't get the full experience, if you don't have an HTC Vive with trackers, is I put part of a mesh around the front of your face so you could see the rim like you're actually in the helmet itself. Now the big difference is, and you may or may not be aware of this, the helmet did not fit on your head. It fit on your shoulders. Your head actually could move inside it. And so when you're actually donning my full suit, you move your head, you see the occlusion of the edges, and you literally have to use your back to look up and down because you don't really have that visibility if it were attached to your neck. So with the light version, I couldn't duplicate that, or let's say I didn't put a lot of effort to try, but it still gives you some occlusion to make you feel like you got, and I also added a dust mask so that when you look at the sun, you feel like you get a glare of glass. So it gives it a more realistic feeling. And because I added the dust mask to a curved mesh, it does give a little bit of a distortion. So you do feel like there's something in front of you. So that's kind of cool. But the point I wanted is that this is a soil sampling device. Basically, it looks like a little tiny butterfly, and they used that to scoop up so they didn't have to crouch down a lot. And then these glossy, shiny rocks actually have physics and collision built into them. So you can literally pick them up and throw them, or put them, like I would play around and put them on top of the helmet because I have collisions. So you can actually throw them at things and they bounce off. I throw them at Neil and he just kind of swats them. I don't know. Actually, they're programmed, so you can't interact with them. But, you know, it's a 5-minute tour.
That's today.
I don't want, huh?
That's today. You might be able to interact with them.
Yeah, in the future, but they'd probably pull out the ray guns that I don't know. Oh, you didn't. Never mind. But you basically see them how they interacted with, in this case, President Nixon as he gave the speech. And then in other cases, they're working with equipment, which I guess I can drop in real quick. Aldrin. So let me jump into this. Okay, so notice everything disappeared in front, and now let's go to the back. And that sphere actually disappears too. In fact, I destroy it because you don't need it again. So when you destroy an object, then you don't have to worry about it taking up texture or mesh, what do you want to call it, resources. So here's the reflectometer that I was telling you about earlier. This has physics, so you could actually kick it around if you wanted to, but there's a collision trigger, so if you don't have it lined up, it's going to tell you you failed your test. This over here is the passive seismometer, which was very sensitive. In fact, it noticed the shifting because they took a little, actually they didn't sleep, but they were supposed to sleep before they went back up to the command module. It could actually know when Neil Armstrong was shuffling around in the LEM. It sensed that. So here's the antenna, and it was powered by these solar arrays on the side. So again, found a basic model on the NASA site, and then really redid all the textures so that they shined and duplicated. In fact, I had to go back and re-UV it because they cheapened it by not allowing me to paint on the back in front of a surface. So I went back and did that, so it's as realistic as possible. And let me jump into the screen real quick. Whoops. Oh, what happened to it? There we go. So if I move in, I should, go in the other direction. There we go. So they pop in. So if you notice, Buzz Aldrin is kneeled down. Frankly, I don't know because we didn't have a camera back there if he actually kneeled, but it looks better. I don't know, he'd have to crouch down because this thing here, what he's playing with is actually the leveler. And there's like a 5-minute segment on in the audio track where he's discussing this with control and how to get the, you know, how you have these little floats that show you when things are balanced. He could never get in the middle. So he had to do this for like 5 minutes, and then Neil Armstrong came by and concurred that it wasn't working, and eventually it just worked. So they were able to level it. But he's, if you notice Neil Armstrong in the background, he's got a device called the ALSCC, which is the Apollo Lunar Surface Close Camera, or close-up camera. And there are 2 cameras in the bottom here, and a battery pack, and a trigger in the handle here that allows them to take stereographic pictures, or about 65 millimeter apart, just like 3D images of the surface, so they could bring that back and use that to determine, just like we are now, the depth of the surface of the different areas. And he took some here in front of the LEM, and over here in this Little West crater. So different regions. So that's why if you look at some of the more real high detailed images, which I think I'm getting very close to matching, you'll see this little device. I didn't have any idea in the beginning what that was. I thought it was a vacuum cleaner or something else, or a container that he just carried, but that's what it is. And then underneath here was, you see this little bag? That was a storage bag. The other thing I added is, if you notice, there's this module that extends. I kept the cover down, but this is where all of those equipment stuff was. They pulled it out of the bottom, and you can see some of the ribbons, tie ribbons and that on the ground there. So I really tried to match exactly what occurred in some of the images, so that you really got a feeling that you're there experiencing what they did 50 years ago. So that's the goal, and I think for the most part, plus the fact that you got a camera, you can take your own pictures, and they'll be in the cloud. You can download them and send them to your family and loved ones, or the disbelievers that, hey, I went to the moon. I've got proof. So there you go.
Great job, Mike.
Yep, so it's very fun. As I mentioned, I'll have a light executable. I'll probably put it up on Steam so that people can download it for free. And then probably a more intricate version if you've got an HTC Vive for about, I don't know, between $3 and $5 that allows you to do a little bit more. And not sure if I want to embellish it with actually interacting with them, because they don't really do much. They have basically metallic mirrored finishes, so you don't really, they could wave at you, I guess. I don't know. I'll have to figure something out. But notice again all the footprints. You see the footprints there?
Yeah.
So again, to achieve a lot. Now, if you did a close match to the photographs, yes, I took a little bit of liberty in their positioning. But again, it's the feeling, not the exactness. And I think from an exact perspective, in fact, these objects, these 2 tests are a little bit further away, but I wanted you to still get the impression of the lunar module. Otherwise, it would have been smaller and further away. And they're actually, oh, you see my cursor here, the little line? They were out about here, so I decided to bring them in a little closer. But you do go way out to the crater, and it's really cool to look back at the lunar module from there. So again, this is coming out July 20th. So if you're in the Portland area, head out to the OMSI. If you can't make it, or it's filled and you didn't get a chance, Encore experiences at the VR Cafe in Washington Square Mall, which is on the borders of Tigard, Beaverton, and Portland. Okay, Chris, I think that's it for this episode.
Awesome. Well, thank you to everyone, all of our listeners, and you, Mike, for inviting me back. And I hope to be back on soon, and we can...
Well, like I said, if we manage it to like once a month, because we both obviously seem to be pretty busy lately, we'll have a lot to talk about, and it should be a little more manageable. And Chris, I really appreciate you coming back on. You know, it's just like half of me was gone for a year plus. So glad for you to come back on. Appreciate it. You've always got some great stuff to show off. Always interested. As mentioned, all this will be in the show notes. And, you know, I've never asked anybody, but I'm going to say it. Chris, you can chime in. Subscribe. If you like what we're doing, you know, we're going to cover this 3D stuff until I'll die. Chris here is still a young whippersnapper, because I think we both love it and we have a lot to say about it. I guess we're not at a loss for words, are we, Chris?
No.
All right. Say goodbye, Chris.
All right. Thanks again. And we'll see you on the next one of All Things 3D.
Okay. Bye, everybody. And I'll bring some sushi next time.